Eyes wide open. Step deep into the Appalachian Mountains, where the trees whisper warnings and the shadows move when no one's looking. If you've ever wondered what's out there, keep watching.
They say in the Appalachian Mountains there's an old house no one dares enter when the rain is coming. Not because it's haunted, but because it remembers. The Whitmore house has stood abandoned for over a century. Every owner claimed the same impossible thing. Whenever it rained, the walls seemed to breathe. A historian named Elias laughed at the stories and spent one stormy night inside. As thunder rolled overhead, the smell of fresh rain filled the house, even though every window was closed. Then words appeared beneath the peeling wallpaper. And wait until the rain. Footsteps echoed from the attic, slow, patient, as though someone had walked the same path for over 100 years. Inside an old cedar chest sat a tiny pair of leather shoes, still wet. Lightning flashed. A little girl stood in the doorway. She looked at Elias and whispered, "It remembers." The next flash, she was gone. So were the shoes. To this day, no records prove a child ever lived there. But every spring, after the first hard rain, people still hear footsteps walking through a house that no longer exists.
Do you guys want to hear something crazy? No, really, this is bizarre. When I was a baby, my mom met a man. She married him. He raised me until I was 8 years old. I thought he was my father. He was my stepfather. One day he went to the store. He never came back. I did not see him for 22 years. These two paintings were in the dining room of my childhood home. And then when I became school age, I would come home from school. I would sit right in front of them and I would speak to them as if they were my parents. I would talk to them. I had some weird connection. Right around this time, from like toddler to like 6, 7 years old, every night before I went to bed, I had these footsteps that would come down the hallway, and the metal doorknob on the old Victorian house would rattle, and this lovely couple would come in, and I was so excited to see them. They would talk to me, they would smile, and they would tuck me in. I did reach a point, probably about 6 or 7, where I had finally addressed it, where I said to my mother and my stepfather, if I don't get to bed soon, like my friends aren't going to be able to come tuck me in, like something like that. There was something that triggered this, and, to their surprise, and who tucks you in? And I explained to them, that I had these two people that came in and tucked me in every night, and they were pretty freaked out by it. But also at that point in my life, they've been freaked out by a lot of stuff that I said, so I don't think they paid it too much mind. Fast forward again, my mom and my stepdad get divorced, okay? My mom kites these. She takes them. She puts them in a storage unit. She did not take them out again until I was moving out of state, getting married, yada, yada. And then she gave me the key and said, well, if you're getting your own house and you're getting married and stuff, I want you to have these. And I was just utter shock. I could not believe she still had them. I had been estranged from them for so long. I missed them. So I just had this dejected look on my face the whole time, and I packed them up, and I didn't ask too many questions. Lock in, we're not even at the crazy part yet. Let's fast forward a little bit more. I am with some friends, we're drinking, we're talking, and out comes this tale about how when I drink certain drinks, my alter ego named Gail comes out. And Gail is not someone I invented. She introduced herself to the gang. And the next morning when I would have anxiety and be like, oh my God, what did I say? What did I do? Everyone would be like, oh, that was just Gail. And this is a whole thing that was going on in 2 different friend groups that I had, not even to my knowledge. So the funny on-running joke for the last 10 years or so has been if I drink X, Y, and Z, not even going to tell you. Gail comes out. And Gail is this wealthy older woman who lives in Rhode Island. And she's been married a handful of times. Sometimes we kind of think she like killed her husbands. It's kind of weird. She's big in jewelry. She wears all of her old wedding rings, like Super Bowl rings. Like there's just so much lore with like Gail introducing herself. Today, okay? We're here. We're present times. I reconnect with my estranged stepfather. I find out that at one point in my childhood, he broke out a photo of his parents. My stepfather grew up in the house that he lived in with me. He bought his old childhood home. We moved in there. He found a photo in the attic of his parents, and he took it downstairs, and my mother framed it, and we put it up on the TV, and I walked in one day, and I went, oh my God! I go, those are my friends who tucked me in at night. Where did you find that photo? And he was like, those are my dead parents, Savannah. What are you talking about? It was a whole thing. So we had discovered that day. I don't really remember that. We discovered that day that, you know, his parents were the ghosts that were coming in and tucking me in at night. These pictures were heirlooms. They were heirlooms from his family. Okay. When I'm growing up and I'm being forced to reconcile with my biological father, whom I did not know, I felt like I had no connection with him, but I was always longing and pining for my stepfather. I felt like that was my dad, my family, my soul connection. I missed him so much. So we're reconnecting. I'm finding out that, you know, his parents were the ghosts that used to tuck me in. These pictures that I've been toting around for the last 10 years are heirlooms of his. There's more. In that house that I grew up in, where all of these ghostly things were happening to me, when he was a child, there was a woman named Gail. I'm going to be honest, I spaced who she is. She was like a friend of the family or a cousin or an aunt or a best friend's aunt or something like that. There was a drunken old woman who fell down the stairs in that house. The stairs were connected to my bedroom. My bedroom had 2 entryways. The stairs were connected to my bedroom. She fell down and died. Her name was Gail. Gail had a drinking problem, and she wore too much jewelry. There's more. My stepfather's mother, the ghost that would come in and tuck me in at night, I found out recently, a couple months ago, her and I share the same birthday because my stepfather texted me and said, happy birthday on my birthday. We just reconciled with him this last year. Like, we just started talking. I found it odd that he remembered my birthday. So I actually said to him, I was like, you remembered my birthday after all this time? And he said, yeah, you and my mother have the same birthday. He asked what I was doing for my birthday. I told him I was going to the Omni Hotel in the White Mountains, the White Mountain Resort, Rushmore. New Hampshire, Omni, big white red roof. Everybody loves it. I love it there. I've always wanted to go there. My boyfriend, my lovely boyfriend, he made arrangements for us to go celebrate my birthday for a couple days there. And that was on my bucket list. I had always wanted to go there. Why did I want to go there? I used to have dreams that I was in the ballroom dancing. I had never been there. I had never heard stories or seen pictures, but I just always had this yearning to go. When I was married, I always asked my husband if he would take me there, and he'd say no. That's why I have a boyfriend now. So my boyfriend took me there. So I tell my stepdad, I go, yeah, for my birthday, we're going to the place. And he goes, oh, that's so funny. My parents used to go there once a year. They would go dancing in the ballroom.
So I love watching videos about scary stuff that happens in the Appalachian Mountains. I went to school in the Appalachian Mountains, specifically in Boone, North Carolina, and there is one encounter and weird, creepy situation that happened to me that I still think about all the time because I genuinely do not know what I saw, but I wanted to post this. This happened a few years ago, and I've never talked about it online because I've been too scared because I genuinely do not know what this thing was. So I wanted to make a video about it so you guys can give me your thoughts and opinions. So if you're from Boone or if you know Boone, you know about the Greenway that's right next to the Watauga County Rec Center. There's like a big playground. There's like soccer fields, and it's always a very crowded spot, especially in the summer. This happened to me in July. So the girls on their hot girl walks, bikers, runners, you name it, they're all there. So usually when I go walk on the Greenway, I always have somebody with me because there's some parts of the trail that you kind of are in the woods, but not really. Like if you do the normal like little loop, it's not very long. It's all paved. And so I was like, this day, I'm just going to go. Like I don't need to take a friend or my brother. Like let's just go on a walk. You're completely fine. It's always when you think that, when something happens. So I'm doing the loop, and the entire time that I'm walking, there's always someone around. And it gets to be the last curve of the loop where you walk, and then you can kind of see the parking lot in the distance. So I could see my car from where I was, but it's the last loop. So I'm coming around the corner on the last loop, and for some reason I turn behind me. I remember looking behind me and seeing no one there. No one there. The entire time I was on this trail, there was always someone around, but going around this last curve, no one. I look to the right, no one. So I'm going and I'm walking. I can literally see my car. I mean, it's a bit away, but like I can see the parking lot. And so I'm walking, and all of a sudden in the distance, because there's like kind of a slanted hill and just trees to the left, but not like too big of a hill, but you know, it's just trees. So you're stepping into the woods. So I'm walking, and in front of me, this figure comes out of the woods, and I can see the back of it, but I could not see a face. It is what I describe as the skinniest and tallest person I've ever seen in my life. Literally a stick figure that you would draw on a piece of paper. This is what it is. Pale white. Pale as a ghost. It has hair down to its shoulders, and it's all ratted and like not up in a hair tie or anything, like just all ratted and the thinnest hair I've ever seen. And it like comes out of the woods with its head turned. It didn't go like straight out. It's got its head turned. So I'm seeing the hair. I'm not seeing a face. And never once did I see a face. Comes out of the woods, and I'm watching it because it's walking slow and almost like moving as if you would see in a horror movie when someone's possessed and their bones are like moving all weird. That's what it was doing as it comes out of the woods, and I stop because I'm like in shock because I'm like, what the... So it starts walking on the path in front of me very, very slow. And the way it's moving does not look human. And I'm standing there, and I like have my phone, and I'm like trying to like look to my phone and look up to make sure this thing isn't going to turn around and like come at me. And I push for my brother's phone number because I'm calling him, and just in case, you know, something happens. And so I'm like looking up, looking down, looking up, looking down, like trying to get to my brother's contact. And I look down, and right as I press to call him, I look up, gone. Nowhere to be seen. It vanished. And let me tell you, to the left are the woods that this thing came out of. To the right is a big open field. Big open field. No one there. No one there. And I would have heard him because it would have taken him a second to get back up to, or him, I call it him, I don't know what it was. It would have taken this thing, you know, a little second to get back up into the woods. And I would have seen that. But I look down and I press call. I look up, nothing. So I start walking. My brother obviously doesn't answer because he never does. I keep walking because at this point I'm like, I just need to get to my car, and I was going to run, but I didn't want this thing to chase after me if it saw me like running. And it's still no one's around me. No one else has hooked this corner, and it was crowded that day. It was almost like I turned that corner and I stepped into a different universe or something. It felt so weird. The energy was weird. It got windy all of a sudden, and this thing just vanished. And so I'm walking, and I turn and look up. When I get to the spot where it had come out of the woods, I turn, nothing. There's like a little path way that I could like a cutout of the bushes and trees. So that's where it came out. I'm looking, and I'm kind of speed walking, but I'm looking, nothing. So I speed walk, and I get to a point off the trail where I just like run to my car. And I did see people like in the parking lot and stuff. So there were like, you know, people around at that point, but I do not know what I saw. And this interaction went very quick because I saw it and immediately was like looking up and down at my phone, and then it was gone. But the way that it moved, the pale skin, and it was almost just like bones, like nothing on the arms, the legs. And I don't even know if it was wearing any pants. Definitely no clothes, because, but it was almost like it was blurred. I don't know. And I wish I had a video, but honestly, would it have even captured on camera? I don't know. It was so freaky.
The house I grew up in, the previous owner hung himself in the backyard from the storage shed. And I think he used to try to talk to me in my dreams. So this dream that I would have would be that I would go outside to check the mailbox like my family would make me do. And I spent a lot of time at home alone. I was like a latchkey kid, if you know that term. And I'd spend a lot of time at home alone. And in this dream, I would go outside to check the mailbox. And when I would turn around from checking the mailbox, he would be standing in my house looking at me out of the window blinds. And if I would go to the front door, he would be at the front door. We had a glass front door, and he'd be on the other side of the glass front door. And he was just staring at me with like this solemn look where he would just kind of be leaning his head almost against the glass. And his body was real dark, like it was like the shadow of him, not like him really. And what's funny is I never knew what this guy looked like. And I saw a photo of him later, and my dream pretty much hit it right on the head, which is pretty wild. And I'm getting chills talking about this out here in the dark, all alone, underneath a full moon. It's a beautiful night. And no matter what window or door I would go to try to get back into my house, he would just be there. And he would only said one thing in this whole dream, and I had this dream multiple times. And he only said one thing ever, and it was, "This is my house. Who are you?" That was it. That's all he ever said to me. That storage shed was tore down the second we moved in, because we knew why we were getting to move in there. It's because the previous owner checked out early. And our dogs, we used to keep our dogs in the backyard where the shed was, and they didn't have access to that part of the yard, but I would take them out on walks. And every time we would pass that spot, I'm looking out of the corner of my eye here because every time I look at the camera, I swear I see a shadow moving over there on the left side. Right out of that bush on the left. But anyhow, every time my dogs would walk past that spot, about once a week, I shouldn't say every time, about once a week when they'd walk by that spot, they would have their haunches up and their hair would be standing up, and they would show their teeth, and they would growl, and they would look up at the sky. And I remember what the storage shed looked like, and where they would be looking up, I would have to imagine would be looking right at his face if he was still there hanging. I've always thought they could see something I couldn't see, or at least I couldn't see while I was awake. Hope no one tries to talk to you in your dreams tonight. It makes for a pretty sleepless night. That's why I'm out here strolling, I guess.
Okay, I thought since my page seems to be inherently Appalachian themed, I would share an Appalachian tradition, which is a ghost story. We always have our ghost stories. This one is true, and this one happened to me. I was about 8th grade at the time, 7th or 8th grade, pretty young. I was camping out in our living room in our house. We live up on this huge hill, and we'd only been living here a couple of years. We built it from the ground up. It used to be a farming property before that. And we're surrounded 360 degrees by woods, okay? So I'm a teenager and camping out in the living room in Appalachias in the middle of the night. And my brother comes from his room and sits in the living room with me, and we're watching something. Can't remember for the life of me what it was. Probably documentaries, because that's his thing. And we hear something on the roof. We go outside. I'm sorry, I'm playing it in my head. We go outside. I was going to go by myself, and he's like, "No, this doesn't feel right." And he goes with me. And the way our house sets up, there's a porch roof and a bank. If you step up on the bank, you can see up on the roof. And so we walk up the bank, and sitting on the roof of our house is a shadow. And he's whistling. And I can't for the life of me remember the tune. But my brother said, "Who is this?" And it just laughed. The figure just laughed. And of course, I was a young girl. I started instantly crying. Like, what else are you going to do? We went and got our parents, of course. It wasn't there. The whole horror movie scenario. There's nothing there. It very much did happen, to the point that my brother, who's 4 years older than me, is like, "I'll sleep in the living room with you tonight." Like, we were terrified. We still don't know what it was to this day. The tune was, almost ethereal. I don't know how to explain it. It's a song that I've never heard. Can't even remember, like, the melody of it. I just remember it. I could feel it inside of me. It was so unsettling. And the shadow was large, and it was sitting on our roof. And it wasn't making like a bunch of noise. It was, I don't know. I don't even know how we heard it. But we did, and we went outside to investigate it, and I still remember it to this day. And if I bring it up to my brother, he's like, shut up, don't talk about that. Let's not talk about that. We shouldn't talk about that. And so we're always told growing up not to whistle outside after dark. This, whatever this was whistling in the dark on our roof. I have a few more Appalachian horror stories. That's the thing about living around here. Things happen. You can believe it or not believe it. Even as a Christian, you know, I've experienced it. I don't know if it was demonic. I don't know what it was. But I will say, whatever it was bad. Like the laughter that came from it, the sound, and then it just stopped. And I know that it was looking right at us. It was just a black figure, like a very large man. And I will never forget it. I'll probably be with Alzheimer's since it's technically in my genetics and still have that creepy thing pop in my head, you know. Again, southern West Virginia, it's 360 degrees. I don't know if you can see it, but our entire house is surrounded by the woods all the way around. And, you know, this is the house I also grew up in. And, yeah, it's kind of inevitable that something's going to happen. Or what do you think it is that we saw? I've never shared it on, like, Reddit or anything. I always thought nobody's going to believe it anyways. And it's not one of those horror stories that, like, something attacks us. But it's one of those that me and my brother both experienced it. And it was so, I don't know, evil. It was so heavy, so spiritually dark.
I just got home. It's nighttime. Pitch black, okay? For perspective, the street I live on, not well lit. Very dark. The street I have to drive down to get onto my street, also very dark, not well lit. To the point where when I am driving down the main street, I can barely see where to turn onto my own street. And so I am driving on the main street. I'm a few streets back from where mine is. And all of a sudden I see that there's this like bright, like a wall of bright light, right? And I'm like, oh, that's kind of hazy. And then I was like, there must be a car coming with their brights on. I looked closer. No cars, nothing. Pretty much pitch black all around where this wall of bright light was. And I was like, I was freaking out because I was about to hit this wall of bright light, right? So I did. I went through the wall of bright light and then boom, pitch black everywhere around me. I looked behind, no light, no haziness, no nothing. Right. So I'm like, am I in psychosis? No, because I came inside and I can see from my house where that area was, and it's pitch black. Like there was never any light there. There never will be again. I don't understand it.
Make a whole Paranormal Activity movie off of this 1 month that I refer to as month as a 15-year-old at the time. Things started off only happening to me. That's why I'm convinced that whatever was in the house was definitely after me. Things ended up happening to my little sister, my mom. Started off, it was very simple things like me hearing things, seeing things, and people would say that it's a figment of my imagination and that I was just, making things up. But I know I wasn't, and I knew what I was experiencing. And after school, I would get home. I would always be the first person home. And when I say energy is everything, it's because I know it to be true. I felt it. Something in my house shifted to the point where I didn't even feel safe anymore. I felt like the only way I can describe it is the house was watching me 24/7. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's the way that it felt. And most days when I would get home, I wouldn't even have the courage to walk inside the house. I would literally wait out in the driveway for someone else to get home. But then as things progressed, this is probably the scariest thing that happened to me. I really had a hard time sleeping at night, because then in my room at night, it felt like people were like standing around my bed just staring at me. And it felt like my entire room was alive and that like I wasn't safe. You know, in the movies when like people are losing their mind, they're having like mental breakdowns because they're just going insane. That was me. I started to sleep with my TV on all night. And the one night I woke up, I think around like 2:30 a.m. and my TV was on. I was laying there and my TV turns off. And the thing about being in that type of fear is your brain kind of goes into protective mode, and you start to like reason and make up things in your head to like protect yourself from believing that what's happening is actually happening. Like I started to think, well, did I set the sleep timer? Maybe I didn't. I just forgot. Shortly after the TV turned off, I'm laying there and I'm, going in my head trying to reason everything. I feel over my blanket, a whole hand touch me from the ankle all the way up to my knee. And that happened twice. Second time it happened, I woke up to what felt like someone sitting at the edge of my bed. Like I felt my whole bed sink down. And when I like stretched out my legs before my legs reached the bottom of the bed, I tapped something. Like I couldn't move my left leg any further and it felt like a person. So towards the end of the month, I just started to sleep in my sister's room because I was so scared of my room. I was scared of the whole entire house. And the only thing that would make me feel better is if I was with someone else. And at that point, me and my sister were being put through the ringer. We were being put through the ringer. Things were only happening to us. Towards the end of the month, I had one of my best friends who was to be like super sensitive to the supernatural or paranormal, which now I fully believe him. I made him come with me because no one was home at night that we were going to a party and I had to pack a bag. So he came with me and we walked in, and he walked in the house for like 3 seconds and like dropped to the floor and just like covered his head. And at the top of my living room is like the hallway to the upstairs because I have like an open space. And he said at the top there were 2 kids that were leaning over the railing just staring down at him. And I believe him because also towards the end of the month, I got home from school one day and I walk up to the door and I felt the energy. I knew something was going to happen if I walked in the house, but I mustered up the courage to at least open up the door. And as soon as I opened up the door, I saw my childhood dog. My dog had been passed away for several years at that point, and she was just sitting there staring at me. And that's the straw that broke the camel's back. And now looking back and thinking about the 2 kids that my friend saw, I have two twin brothers that passed away as babies. So in my head, I'm thinking like these spirits are now masking themselves as things that I might be familiar with to like entice me to like go after them. I don't know. I get chills even just thinking about it. After I saw my childhood dog, her name was Penny, I called my mom and I was freaking out. At that point, I had been pushed past the point of insanity. I took as much as I possibly could, but I broke now. And at that point, I didn't know that my mom on the same time was in her bathroom. And at this point, she doesn't believe in any of this stuff. She's in her bathroom on the one side and she looks out, and past the doorway, the way she describes it is a woman in white passes by, turns and looks at her and keeps walking. So now my mom decides to get the house saged. She sages the house herself. I had no idea that she did that. The next day I get home from school, I walk up, I put my key in, I walk in the house, and I'm like, it feels a lot different in here. Why am I not scared? Why does it feel like the house is not watching me? Why does the sun coming in through the windows feel brighter? Why does it feel different? It's because the energy shifted. I didn't know that at the time, but later that night I found out my mom had the house saged, and I'm like, that makes so much sense. I felt safe again. It felt like home again. I wasn't scared to be alone anymore. And this is just a very, very quick synopsis. Like I'm telling you, I could make a whole movie about this month. My sister's got stories. I'm sure my mom has more stories if I ask her. But yeah, so I believe in all the paranormal.
I grew up hearing stories about the Appalachian Mountains. My grandparents would always tell us kids that there were just simply places out there that you should not be after dark. Their stories were very rarely about the monsters of the Appalachian Mountains, more over the people that we could encounter out in those mountains. They would always tell us if you're ever out there and then realize that you're not alone, just don't go looking who's watching for you, just get out of there. feel like that should just be rule of thumb everywhere, not just in the Appalachian Mountains. My grandparents definitely instilled that into us kids. But as kids, I always assumed that, it was just like another mountain superstition, because if you live out in those areas, like, how much superstition, how much folklore there is about like random. I honestly thought that they were just telling me these things so that I wouldn't wander out too far, which, to be fair, I did wander out far a lot. As I grew up, I started to realize that they were doing that out of like sheer protection. Like, they were trying to protect me. Like, they were trying to prepare me for something, or I don't know, just to be ready for anything. A few summers ago, I decided to go hiking out to this like abandoned fire tower that was going viral online. Not really viral, but on the urbex side of TikTok, it was going kind of viral on that side of TikTok. So I decided that I wanted to go explore it as well. The trail was not supposed to be like a difficult trail. I'm an avid hiker anyway, so like even if it was difficult, it wouldn't have been an issue. But this one in particular was not supposed to be like grueling at all. It was just like this old logging trail or whatever, logging trails, and it just kind of like broke off into the forest. And I was not worried in the slightest. I had snacks, I had water, I had my pack, I had everything I needed. And I figured that I would just be back to my car before dinner. But about an hour into the hike, I realized that I hadn't seen a trail marker in a very long time. It wasn't enough to make me panic right off the bat, but like it was enough to make me kind of slow down and like try to get my bearings. I pulled out my phone and I'm trying to like check the map that I had previously downloaded before hand going on this hike, but I had absolutely no service. And for some reason, my downloads were just not downloaded. I don't know. Don't ask me. Seriously, I'm so sick of Apple for this reason and many more reasons, to be honest, but that's a whole other video in itself. But again, I wasn't too crazily concerned because you're going out into the woods, like you expect these bad things to happen. Like you have full expectation that something is going to go wrong. So I was like, of course it's this that has to go wrong, right? I just started to keep walking. And as I kept walking, I started to notice something off about the trees around me. Almost every single one had this really long vertical cut through its bark. They weren't any kind of like hiking blazes or like initials or anything that somebody had carved in there intentionally. Still did look intentional, but it just looked like somebody had like intentionally dragged a knife across like and making slashes through these tree trunks. I'm like, okay, whatever. Maybe these are some like kind of weird forestry marking or something. The further down that I went, the newer the cuts became. It gave me a really weird feeling, but I was trying my hardest to convince myself that there was a logical explanation behind it because I'm out there by myself. Then as I'm standing there trying to figure out a logical explanation for it all, I hear a whistle. And it wasn't like a bird whistle or like anything like that. It was just one single like whistle. I almost whistled, but it's 5 a.m. Anyways, after hearing it, I stopped and I listened, and I'm like just standing there listening. And I noticed that the forest had become dead silent. There was like birds before, the skittering of little forest animals on the forest floor and stuff like that, but they were just all stopped. And so I call out and I ask if anybody is out there. And I know everybody always asks me, if you grew up in Appalachia and you know the rules of the mountains, why the do you ever do that? But like I said in the beginning of this, I was a child who thought that like my family was just telling us this stuff to us. So any chance that I got, I would just try and test these rules, Anyways, I call out and I get silence in response. So I shrug it off and I just keep walking because what am I going to do? I'm just out there by myself. And literally just like a minute later, I hear another whistle, but this time it comes directly behind me. I spin around and I'm expecting to see another hiker standing there. There was not a single other person in sight. That's when I noticed that there was somebody standing, like peeking out from behind a tree that was a little bit further down the ridge from me. They were too far away for me to make out any details about them, but I could clearly tell that they were facing me. And they weren't like moving or waving or anything. They were just kind of standing there. So me just thinking that it was another hiker or something, I raise my hand up and I wave at them like a normal hiker would do, being polite on the trail so that you don't get murdered. But they never reacted. So I'm starting to think, okay, maybe something's wrong with them. Maybe they need help or something. So I start walking towards them. But the moment that I got close enough to see their face, they stepped behind the tree. When I reached the spot where they had been standing, there was nobody standing there. Like nobody was there. And I didn't hear any footsteps of anybody walking away, no snapping of the twigs or literally anything at all. No explanation. Literally just a set of bare footprints behind the tree. Just a single pair of footprints. Oh my God. I can't make it up. At first though, I felt relief because I was like, okay, this means that I'm not crazy. I really did see somebody here. But like, at that point, I'm like, okay, it's time to head back, especially because these things were not facing the opposite direction. They were facing where I was standing, meaning whoever was standing there literally just watching me the whole time. So I pulled out my compass and I'm walking in the direction that I'm hoping is going to lead me to the trailhead. And before I'd gone even 50 yards, I hear another whistle. Then another answered that whistle from off to my right. And then a third one came from up further beyond the hill. Like, honestly, it sounded like they were communicating, like it was not just random sounds in the woods anymore. As I kept walking, the whistles just kept changing positions until it slowly dawned on me that they were not following me from behind. They were like keeping close contact, like from each side of me. You know what I mean? Like it felt like I was walking in the middle of them and they were just all on the outskirts. I never once heard anybody running. I never once heard another footstep. I never once heard any kind of like actual voice other than a whistle. Every now and then I would catch like a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, like a shoulder peeking out from behind a tree, or like something like a foot scattering that I thought to be somebody's crouching behind a bush. But at the time I just told myself, that's just a rock, girl. You're fine. Keep going. Every time I would turn my head fully, there would be nothing there for me to see. You know what I mean? I eventually caught the smell of fire smoke drifting through the woods. And at first I felt relief because I was like, okay, maybe there's like a house or like a cabin nearby and they can point me in the direction of the trailhead or the road or wherever, like give me here. Did find a cabin, but it was like this old, crusty, musty, dusty looking thing. Like honestly, like it pieced together by decades of junk that somebody had just found. I'm talking rusted sheet metal, old license plates. This was built out of literal junk. Honestly, it didn't look abandoned, but it also didn't look like a very pleasant place to be or like a place you want to go knock on the door. Then I noticed that there was shoes, like dozens of children's shoes scattered all over the front porch. Tiny little sneakers, worn out boots, little teeny tiny sandals. None of them had a matching pair, and they all looked like they had been sitting there for decades. Every instinct in me told me to get out of there, so I start backing away as slowly as I can, just kind of like looking, hoping that I'm not going to make any sounds. As I'm backing away, the front door slowly creaks open. It only opened up a few inches. Like I couldn't see who was inside. I couldn't see anything inside. All I heard was the voice that came out of the crack. The voice came from the crack in the door and they said, "Are you lost?" And I just keep taking more steps backwards because I'm like, oh, no. And then the voice asked me if I was hungry. You know, they're like, come on, come, we'll help you. Are you hungry? You want some food? Before I could even think of responding, another voice came from behind the door and it said no. And then everything went silent. I heard several people whimpering, like little tiny voices whimpering from behind the door. I honestly, at that moment, I did not wait to find out what they were saying or what was going on. I booked it and ran as fast as I possibly could. My lungs were burning and my legs literally felt like they were about to give out. I don't think I've ever pushed myself as hard as I did that day. And the weirdest part is I didn't hear anybody chasing me. Like nobody was giving chase. I was just running for my life. The only sound that stayed with me the entire time was the whistling. Like it kept moving with me and it was always somewhere above, like somewhere ahead of me. You know what I mean? Then it was beside me. Then it was beside me again, but always like a little bit in front, never like directly beside me. It was always like, you know what I mean? Eventually, after running for what seemed like hours, but I'm sure it was only maybe like 10 minutes, burst out onto this gravel road where this guy was like putting firewood in the back of his truck. And he's like, oh my God. Before I could even explain to this man what happened, he looked at me, looked at the tree line, looked at me again, looked at the tree line, grabbed my arm, threw me in his truck, which if I wasn't already scared as was beyond those woods in the tree line, I would have been horrified that this man grabbed me and threw me in his truck. Something told me, like, I just knew that he was saving me from something, okay? Like, he knew what was going on. He knew something about what was in the forest, whatever. He didn't mention anything about it, and I didn't talk to him about it in there. I was just like, thank you so much for picking me up. I was, like, freaking out. And then he brought me back to town, and that was that. So if there's rules of the mountains that you live near, or if there's rules in general, follow them because they're there for a reason.
The story I'm about to tell you is not an Appalachian ghost story, but it is a ghost story that happened in Appalachia. Growing up, my mom was a single mom. We were always just kind of, doing the best we can. And I remember there was a time we were in transition and needed a place to stay. Well, a friend of my mom's who was very, very wealthy, she came to my mom and was like, hey, so I have a house and it is empty and has been empty for some time. And I really need someone to stay there, mainly because people vandalize and break into and all the things. So, my mom knew the house, of course, and she was like, absolutely. She was ecstatic. Me being a kid, I was probably 7 or 8 at this time, not knowing what to expect. We pull up to this house, and when I tell you this house was massive, it was massive. The epitome of what you would see in a scary movie, haunted house, like literally looked like a haunted house. So we pull in, my mom and I go in, it's fully furnished. We walk in, completely, like, dining room is completely set up. Living room is completely set up. I will never forget this giant organ that's set over on the side in the living room. There were two living rooms. That was a formal one. There was this, big staircase in the foyer. Foyer stepped down. There was a room for a hot tub, several bedrooms. Then upstairs there was several bedrooms. This was a massive house. On top of the fact that there was also a basement. The upstairs had a master suite that had the bathroom attached to it. And of course, that's where my mom slept. And because I was a kid and I was terrified, I slept in there as well. At the end of that hallway was a room that always was locked. I don't know what was in it to this day. Across the hall was a room that we called my room, and it was blue. I never will forget. Everything was blue. The bed stuff was blue, and it had teddy bears on it. But I was terrified of that room. I wouldn't go in there. I wanted nothing to do with that room. I may have been in there twice in all of the months that we lived in this house. At night, I felt like the whole house took on a completely different persona. It just got dark. And I don't mean that in a physical light sense. It just got dark. Everything felt heavy and closed off. And actually outside, if you would see snakes and things like that, like you could stand on the balcony and just look at them. They just came out everywhere there. It was the strangest thing. Down in the basement was a poker table, and literally it looked like someone had left in the middle of a game and left everything right where it was. Now, me as a kid, I never experienced any physical thing in that house. I never seen anything, but I felt it all the time. I would not leave my mom's side the entire time that we lived in this house. She would go to the bathroom, and I would sit in the hallway outside the door. My mom later told me that there would be nights that we'd be in bed and she would stay up and read late, and she would hear the dishes downstairs. Even one time she dealt with hearing the organ in the living room playing music. Also later had friends tell me that later on, after we moved out and the house sat empty for a long, long time, people did go in. They would use it as a party place. They would break into it and party in there. And they had several experiences, one of which all the power was cut off and all of the lights in the house flashed red. Another in which someone was slammed against the wall in the room that consistently stayed locked when we lived there. There isn't a doubt in my mind that that house has an evil spirit, and it was terrifying. One last thing. That house is now an Airbnb.
I am born and raised in the mountains of North Carolina, specifically the Appalachian Mountains. When I was a freshman in college, I was also roommates with one of my high school best friends, Anna. Anna and I went through a phase where we were honestly kind of obsessed with anything that was haunted, just because I think we were so intrigued with it. One weekend, we decided that we wanted to go home. While we were home, we decided that we were going to meet up with two guys in Boone at the Walmart parking lot, and we were going to go to this church that was proclaimed to be haunted. I personally did not believe that it was haunted, but I was down to give it a whirl and go visit. So we meet up with these guys, and it's the two guys that are in the front seat. Anna and I are in the back seat. And these guys, I believe that they were volunteer firefighters, but they had like all of the things in the trucks. They had like the CB radio. They had like all kinds of like technology things in their truck. I don't know what they were. I just know that one of them was a CB radio. That's important for a little bit later on in the story. So we get to this church, he parks the truck, and we get out. And to be honest with you, I kind of stay back at the truck just because I didn't really want to test the waters if the church was actually haunted. So I kind of stood at the truck. The guys go do their thing. I think one of them literally goes to pee in the woods. The other one is just kind of like walking around. And Anna is not directly beside me, but she's kind of near me as well. And we're just kind of chilling. Then at one point, the guys kind of come back, so we're all kind of standing near the truck, just kind of chit-chatting. When all of a sudden, the three of us, so the two guys and I, all three hear the exact same thing. It's a very, very, very deep, dark voice that says, "Get out." Now, I also heard children laughing in the background. So I am the only one of the four of us that heard children laughing in the background and the "get out." But three of us heard an incredibly deep, dark voice that said, "Get out." So we haul into the truck. We're like running in there. And I just remember looking at Anna going, "Anna, what are you doing? Get in the truck. Did you not hear that?" Anna's like, "No, I didn't hear it." Oh my gosh. So she gets in the truck and the guys literally zoom off. We just go right past and we just get away. Well, I forgot to mention this in the very beginning of the story, but the church is on a dead-end road. It's also a dirt road. So he gets to the end of the road and we realize that we have to turn around, pass the church again to actually leave the area. Before he passes the church again, he literally stops the truck, turns the radio down, and he says, "Are y'all ready?" This might sound so dramatic, but we literally wanted to brace ourselves before he passed the church again. And how the church is located, it was literally like in the center of the road, and you kind of like had to go around it to get past it. So you would literally, as we were leaving, we saw the front of the church, and then as we were leaving, we saw the back of the church. But we literally pass it, and I'm not kidding you when I tell you that the church was glowing red. And in addition to that, all of our cell phones turned off. The radio was changing channels. The CB radio was going static, and all of the things that they had on their visors were literally just static radio sounds. Everything was just going, all the technology in the truck was literally wigging out as we're passing the truck. So obviously, we're pretty freaked out, nonetheless. We eventually get back to Anna's car, and at this point, I literally was so freaked out. I was like, "Anna, I'm staying the night with you. There's no way I'm going home." Absolutely not. As Anna and I are leaving Boone to head back up to Banner Elk, we notice that there's like this red globe light that's kind of following us the entire way up to her house. We park her car at her house, and her house is literally located on top of a mountain. It's absolutely stunning. And her house is here, and then like her front yard, backyard area is what I would consider like a valley, kind of. It's just like a big, beautiful field. And we park her car, and that red globe is literally in the field in front of us. And we're just like, what the heck? Do you see what we see? Like, that's so weird. I can remember this like it was yesterday. Us seeing that red globe following us the entire way, and then in her front yard completely freaked us out. So we literally counted down so we could brace ourselves to leave her car to get inside of her house. As we're running into the house, we hear church bells ringing. And I haven't mentioned this part yet, but it was nighttime. I think it was probably close to midnight by the time that we actually made it to her house. So definitely not a time of the day that you would hear church bells ringing. Fast forward like maybe 20-ish, 30-ish minutes, heck, maybe even an hour. Who knows? We were both so freaked out. I was just on the cusp of about to fall asleep when all of a sudden Anna's mom comes running into Anna's room, and she's like, "Girls, what are you doing?" We were like, "What are you talking about? We haven't done anything. We've been home for probably an hour. We've just been chilling. Like, what are you talking about?" She was like, "I heard the door shut so hard that it woke me up. It literally woke me up." We were like, "Marsha, we haven't done anything. We've not moved since we got home. We really don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't us." And she was like, "All right, well, that's weird." So then we all fall asleep. And then this is the part where I promised I would never fiddle with anything haunted ever again after this next detail. That next morning, we woke up and I had scratches and bruises all the way down both of my legs. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty daggum freaky if you ask me.
This one coming from my late grandmother. And it allegedly happened to my dad's first wife. My mom is wife number 2, just so you know. Anyway, my grandmother's mother, my great-grandmother, was named Annie, and she could be kind of a pistol. She was short. I want you to think like Sophia from the Golden Girls, only with a German temperament and not an Italian one. So when she had a temper, she had a temper. But anyway, my dad's first wife, who's still alive, and I will not name her, had a bit of a problem. And there was some marital issues happening, and my great-grandmother did not like this woman at all. And so my great-grandmother on her deathbed told her that if she were to do anything to harm her grandson, she'd come back to get her. And so great-grandma dies, is buried, and then something happens between my dad and his ex-wife. And I think this involves my dad accidentally getting shot in the foot with a pew-pew. But anyway, after that event happens, it's evening. This woman is going out of the house for something, and she looks at this apple tree that used to be in the yard, and she sees the spirit of my great-grandmother standing and pointing her, laughing and saying, "I told you I was going to get you." According to my great-grandmother, the woman quickly ran into her house, shut the door, looked like scared half to death, and it took a while before she would even go back in that house or near the apple tree. So, sometimes they come back.
Most people think you have to travel halfway across the country to find haunted roads, cursed bridges, or forests with stories that refuse to die. But sometimes the creepiest legends are sitting right in your own backyard. Tonight we're staying close to home. Right here in northeastern Pennsylvania, we're talking phantom hitchhikers, shadow people walking one of the largest concrete railroad bridges ever built, and something hidden inside our Appalachian forests that may know your name before you ever stepped onto the trail. So grab your flashlight, don't answer the whistles. Now, anyone who's lived around Dalton, Factoryville, or Clark Summit long enough has probably heard some version of the story. You're driving home. It's late. Rain is falling just hard enough that your headlights seem swallowed by the darkness. Then you see someone standing along Route 6. Usually they're described as young, cold, sometimes wearing outdated clothing, sometimes soaking wet despite there being no rain. Almost everyone tells the story differently, but the ending is strangely consistent. The driver stops. The hitchhiker quietly gets inside. No conversation, just silence. A few miles later, when the driver turns to speak, the passenger is gone. No open door, no footsteps, nothing. Just an empty seat. Some locals claim fatal crashes along Route 6 gave birth to the story. Others believe it is simply folklore passed from generation to generation. But either way, people still report slowing down when they see someone standing alone after midnight, just in case. Towering over Nicholson stands one of Pennsylvania's greatest engineering achievements, the Tunkhannock Viaduct. Completed in 1915, this enormous concrete railroad bridge stretches more than half a mile and rises hundreds of feet above the valley. It remains one of the largest reinforced concrete railroad bridges in the world. Building something this massive wasn't easy. Construction was dangerous. Workers faced dizzying heights, primitive equipment, and harsh conditions. Over the years, local stories began to spread. Some claimed workers accidentally fell into wet concrete during the construction, their bodies forever sealed inside the bridge. It's an unsettling image, but here's where history and legend split apart. There's no verified historical evidence that workers were entombed in the concrete of the viaduct. While deaths occurred during large industrial construction projects over the era, the buried in the bridge story appeared to be local folklore rather than documented fact. That hasn't stopped the sightings, though. Visitors have described dark figures pacing along the top of the bridge long after trains have passed. Others report seeing silhouettes standing perfectly still, only to disappear when looked at directly. Could they simply be shadows cast by the bridge's massive arches, optical illusions, or is this the legend keeping itself alive? Now, This is where Appalachian folklore, or if you're from the South, Appalachian folklore, starts getting uncomfortable. Deep forests have always carried rules. Don't wander after dark. Don't follow strange lights. And above all, don't answer something that calls your name from the woods. Throughout Appalachia history, stories have circulated for generations about mysterious whistles echoing between the trees. Not bird calls, not coyotes, something that sounds almost human. Some hikers near the forests surrounding Lackawanna State Park have shared unsettling stories of hearing whistles that seemed to move around them, or voices that sounded oddly familiar in places where no one else should have been. And I feel like I experienced this at Keystone College. Many of these accounts have natural explanations. Sound behaves strangely in dense forests, and birds, wind, and echoes can all create eerie effects. Still, the old mountain advice remains surprisingly consistent. If the woods whistle, you keep walking. If something calls your name, you don't answer. Whether that wisdom comes from generations of practical survival or from something people couldn't explain depends on who you ask. Maybe every town has its ghost story. Maybe there's simply warnings wrapped in folklore. A hitchhiker reminding us to slow down. A bridge reminding us of the cost of human ambition. A forest reminding us that nature doesn't always care if we're comfortable. Or maybe, just maybe, some stories survive because something happened that no one could ever fully explain.
The autumn of 1851, in a narrow hollow in the Blue Ridge Mountains of western North Carolina, 31 children from a single one-room schoolhouse walked through a gap in the ridge on a clear Tuesday morning and were never seen in that condition again. 4 stumbled out of the woods 6 days later, barefoot, silent, their hair turned white at the temples. The other 27 have remained, in some official form or another, missing for 175 years. What the county ledger recorded as an accident of weather, what the church recorded as a visitation of Providence, and what the 4 survivors refused to speak of until the last of them died in a state sanitarium in 1928, adds up to a story the county itself tried to bury 3 separate times. The marker that once stood at the mouth of that hollow was removed in 1889. The schoolhouse was burned in 1902. The land was sold and resold until no living person in the valley could point to where the children had gone. What you are about to hear was written down in a diary that a granddaughter handed to a historian in 1971. And what that diary contained has never been read aloud before. To understand what happened on the morning of October the 21st, 1851, you first have to understand the place. When the settlement of Ashcombe lay in a fold of the Blue Ridge about 30 miles west of the nearest proper town, which at that time was Morganton. It was not a town in any sense that would be recognized today. It was a loose scatter of perhaps 40 farmhouses, a single Presbyterian meeting hall that doubled as the schoolhouse on weekdays, a blacksmith, a grist mill on Pigeon Creek, and a general store run by a widow named Prudence Halsey. The people who lived there were of Scots-Irish and German descent, most of them 2nd or 3rd generation from families who had come down the Great Wagon Road from Pennsylvania in the 1780s. They farmed tobacco and corn in the bottoms, kept hogs in the woods, and distilled a thin whiskey that the revenue men had not yet found a reason to climb the ridges for. The winters were hard, the drifts in the high passes sometimes closing the road to Morganton for weeks at a stretch. The summers were green and close, the air so thick with moisture that the laundry hung on the line at dawn would still be damp at dusk. The people were, by every account left to us, pious, wary of outsiders, and keepers of long memories. They did not forget insults. They did not forget debts. And they did not forget, though they did not often speak of it, the things that the older ones had been told by the older ones before them about the ground that lay above the creek. The hollow itself, the one the children walked into, sat perhaps a mile and a quarter east of the meeting hall, up a path that ran along the north bank of Pigeon Creek and then cut south between two ridges. It was called, on the one surviving county survey map from 1847, Ashcombe Hollow, after the first family that had settled the valley. By 1851, it was more commonly called by the older name, which the original settlers had taken from a Cherokee word they had imperfectly learned, and which meant, as best as anyone could translate it, the place where the ground remembers. The Cherokee themselves had been driven out of that region in 1838, during the removal, and what remained of their knowledge of the land had passed into the settlers as fragments of warning. Children were not supposed to go up that hollow after dark. Hunters avoided it in the late autumn. Women did not go there to gather galax or moss, though the shaded coves along the creek produced both in abundance. A man named Josiah Vetch, who had settled the farm nearest the hollow's mouth in 1821, had nailed a wooden cross to a beech tree at the path's entrance in 1829, and had told his neighbors it was to mark the boundary of a certain kind of land, though he would never say what kind. When pressed, which was rare, he would say only that a man who had sold him the South 40 in 1824, an older German named Hagenbeck, who had been in the valley since 1798, had pointed to the beech tree on the day of the sale and said, in the halting English of his old age, "You do not cross this mark at dusk, and you do not send a child across it alone, not for any reason, not for any price." Hagenbeck had died in the winter of 1827, without further explanation. Vetch had waited 2 years before putting up the cross.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, question everything, and don't follow the sounds in the dark.